We're in the sixth and last episode of the self-storage due diligence process that at least we're using today in the world of self-storage. So let's complete it by talking about how to put your first facility into service and how to use the due diligence time period to create that strategy. My name's Mark Helm, and I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage, and I'm the creator of the Quick Start Academy. The Quick Start Academy houses the on-demand self-storage boot camp where we go into a lot of detail about due diligence. The boot camp has a 4-phase self-storage strategy that's designed to get you from wherever you are right now to putting your first facility into service, and an entire phase of it is the due diligence process. You can find out more at creatingwealththroughselfstorage.com. So far in the due diligence, episode 1, we talked about timelines, what to get from the seller. In the second episode, we talked about the physical inspections and how to deal with third-party vendors. Then we talked about how to review the financial records and operations of the facility. Then we talked about how to do expansions. Then last week we talked about conversions. Today we're going to talk about how to put your first facility into service. Now remember, our relationship to the due diligence process is we're gathering as much information as we can get. We're revising our numbers, looking at the performance of the storage facility, how this fits into our overall investment goals, and we're replacing our assumptions with the information that we can find out. Then at the end of the due diligence, we look at the project again with fresh eyes, and does it now, with all the information we've gathered, does it meet our business strategy, our minimum benchmark numbers for putting a deal into service? For the purposes of this episode, let's assume yes, it does, and you are removing your contingencies on the contract and moving towards closing. That's where we'll pick up at this moment in this episode about designing your strategy to put your first self-storage or your next self-storage facility into service. So let's talk about the physical facility itself. In the preliminary pro forma, at least in the Storage World Analyzer, if you're buying an existing facility, there's usually a line called Current Facility Upgrades. If you're using the analyzer, it's on the tab where the loan page is. How much money did you budget in for initial capital improvements? Or if you're doing an expansion, very often we put that number in that construction budget. Now, does that number need to be adjusted? As you did your due diligence and you got bids or looked at what actually has to really happen on the facility, did you have too much money in that number, or did you have not enough? Were you able to adjust your construction budget to absorb, or did you actually take, very often we've taken money out of that number and put it into construction. If you went over, are you going to have to put more money in the deal, and does it still work? Are you going to borrow more money, and does the deal still work at that time? Or did you just move construction money around to cover it if you're doing an expansion or conversion? So that's where we start with the physical property. Often we discover items we thought we were going to have to do, we don't. Then, as we look forward into our ownership, in our pro forma, we usually put some type of reserve fund away, 12 to 15 cents a square foot, based on what we're replacing now and the projected life of, let's say, the HVAC or the roof, or what with capital improvements, the paving. What is the amount we're really going to have to put forward each year so that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we can replace the HVAC? We do all of that now and get that reserve fund in place, and we look at it, and does it still meet our benchmark numbers? Usually the answer is yes. Now let's talk about employees. I could do an entire series on employees, and I am definitely not an expert at it, and we have made a lot of mistakes in the area of employees. But usually you're either going to be ramping up your employees or ramping down your employees based on what your business strategy is and how this particular facility fits into that strategy. Now, one of the things we've done right is we have an employee manual from day one. That's designed to protect you, the storage owner. Now, for most of us, we're small investors. How in the world do we come up with an employee manual? Well, how I did it was the SSA, Self-Storage Association, sells one. And I downloaded it as a Word document, and we have updated it continually over the past 20 years in the self-storage business. It just keeps getting updated, and updated. And that was our starting point. And we ended up putting in our operations procedures into that manual that we downloaded from the SSA. And my coaching is anything you do more than once in a month, you document how you want it done. So every morning the facility gets opened and the operating system gets booted. Document how you do that. Every day you close, move-ins, what the customer gets, how to clean a unit, how to close out at the end of the day, how you want the deposits made, your entire operations procedure over time, over the first year or so of your ownership, you document what you want done, and your manual begins to grow. Now, what this does is it allows you to really develop a storage business, not just own a facility. And you become system dependent, not people dependent. Believe me, when it comes time to sell your business, having that systems dependent business in place adds a lot of value to it. I cannot tell you the number of times we've looked at a facility where the owner is so utterly dependent on the manager that if something happens to that manager's sick, or that manager quits, or that manager steals money, that owner's dead in the water because that owner doesn't have a clue what to do to run that facility. Do not be that kind of owner. Design a business that runs on systems, not people. And it starts before you put your first facility into service. Usually those managers are not as cracked up as most owners think. And my experience is employees come and go. You want to have your systems in place. We're at the point now where if I had to go in and run a facility for a day, I'd have to pull that manual out and see how to do it, because things change over time. Some of you will be adding employees, some of you will be reducing your employees. It really doesn't matter. Whichever direction you're moving, begin to streamline and structure and document your operating procedures that you want based on your business strategy as the owner. That's your responsibility. Now let's talk about customers. During the due diligence period, we've gone in, we've looked at all the contracts and the files and the operating system, and part of what we discussed was you look at what the accounts receivable, the people who owe you money, and you've got the stories. You've looked at how many customers there are. In some facilities, it's 3 pages. In others, it's like 5 people. But you find out, like, what's the deal? What's the history of these customers? Because what you want to do is now, when you're getting ready to close, you want to design a strategy for how to deal with that. My coaching is, we talked about this in previous episodes, no payment plans. What you want to do is, one, you want to design a lien letter for those customers that are 30 days or whatever the lien time period is in the state you happen to be in. The day you close, that letter is going to go out, and it's going to say something to the effect is that you are in lien, you owe this amount of money, and based on what the lien laws are for the state you're in, this is when the auction's going to be held on your unit. My coaching is come up with a company strategy, and by the way, this goes into your operating manual, this goes into your employee manual, of what you will take for a customer that's in lien. So for us, for example, it's 50%. If somebody pays me 50% of what they owe me, and they will vacate their unit in 48 hours, they can go. I'm way ahead of the curve. People will pay more for their stuff than usually somebody buying their stuff at auction. And I can terminate that lease and get that unit back into production a lot quicker and with a lot less calories burned than if I hold the auction. But either way, that unit's going to go back into service. Yes, my vacancy rate's going to increase, my occupancy rate will go down, but it doesn't matter. I'm not getting income on that anyway. If they have a payment plan, the second they miss their payment, that payment plan is terminated. Now we slate that unit for auction, 50% or whatever you come up with of what's owed. That lien letter goes out the day you close. For the rest of the customers, we send a letter out the day it closes that introducing yourself as the new owner. Kind of the tone of the letter is, we're thrilled to have you as a customer. Here are the improvements we intend to make on the property. Everything's going to remain the same. And thank you for being a good customer. Make your payments to blank in the name of your company. Now, if you're planning on having a price increase, which we usually do, that's great. What we typically do, we'll raise the street rates first, then we start our improvements or the construction, or in some way we improve the property, then we raise the prices on the existing customers. I want them to see that we're actually doing what we said, and then we start having the price increase. So it might be a month or two before we start raising the prices on the existing customers. If we've got, and most of the time we're doing some kind of improvements on the property, painting, adding more units, putting a new gate system in, putting a kiosk, or whatever our strategy is, and then we do the price increase there. The tone of the letter is, for you, nothing's going to change, just improve, and thank you for being a customer. Getting back to the lien, what's really critical is whatever you come up with as a strategy for how much you will take, be consistent with that. What you don't want to be doing is taking different amounts for different people, especially if some of the people that you're taking different amount for are in protected classes under federal and state law. That really opens you up to liability. Plus, it's probably just the right thing to do. Whatever you come up with as your company is what you will take as your company to let somebody out of their lease. Hold to that and be consistent no matter who it is. Now, the day you close, have both letters ready to go. Your operating system usually has all the addresses. Those letters go out immediately. Let's talk about the procedures you're going to put in place. There's really no way in a general episode like this to cover everything that you'll design in your strategy, but here's some of the highlights. In the boot camp, we have checklists and details of everything that needs to be done to transfer one property to another, and this isn't the place for that, but let me cover at a very high level some of the things that I'm talking about here. After you remove the contingencies and prior to the closing, you need to select what operating system you're going to use. Then you need to upload. Very often the companies that we select will handle this for us. But you need to upload or input all the data, the rent roll, the customers, the unit misc and asking prices. You need to get all of that into your operating system prior to closing. And then what we typically do is then we update it daily with the current facility. So our facility, if possible, our facility is going to mirror on a day-by-day basis in, let's say, the 2 or 3 weeks prior from contingency removal to closing. Our operating system is going to reflect what's really going on in the facility. At the very least, on the day of closing, have it correct. But you want to mirror the move-ins, the move-outs, and what's going on. So the day of the closing, in a perfect scenario, you just basically unplug their computer, plug your computer in, or theoretically it might be cloud-based and you're using their computer, but you just switch from one system to the next. You also want to get your operating bank accounts open. Make sure with the banks, as you're opening those accounts, that the banks know that customer, if you take checks, and we do, most places do, if you're going to take checks, the customers may be making the check out to the old facility for a while. I've never had an issue with the bank accepting that check and putting it in our operating account as long as we let them know up front that this may be the case. Usually it takes, 3 or 4 months before that stops happening for us. Make sure you've got your credit card vendor selected and ready to go so that the day after the closing, all the automatic credit card, everything gets put into your operating account, not the seller's. We also update the title for the closing during this time period between contingency removal and closing. And we work on the rent prorations for the closing. Now, the day of the closing, the lien letters go out and the letters to the remaining customers go out immediately. Then what I recommend, you or one of your partners, not the manager, but you do a walkthrough inspection. You print off what's on the computer. You walk through unit by unit and make sure what's in the computer matches what's in there. You'd be surprised some of the things we found the day after the closing, like units that the manager had been using to store stuff. Customers that didn't have a lease, just do a walkthrough of every single unit and make sure what's physically a reality on the facility is exactly what's in the computer. It also lets your employees know that you're running a tight ship. Any variances adjusted in the computer, make sure from day one it's correct. Then periodically we show up and do our own lock inspection reports. We expect the managers to do them regularly, but once a month or so one of our operating partner will show up and do it, and it just sets the tone and lets them know that we're watching. And we want to make sure what's in the computer is an accurate reflection of what's going on in reality. Also, utilities, we change the locks on the doors. We change, if we got locks on vacant units, we change our vacant unit lock system out, and we replace overlocks. Frankly, we have our own overlocks. So we got all of that designed and in place. How we're going to change the operational procedures, how we're going to handle the customers, how to switch over, just all the stuff you go through to switch over from one owner to the next. We design all of that during that due diligence period. Now here's the good news. You don't have to do it perfect. And you will make mistakes. Give yourself some space to make mistakes. How we operate and handle a closing today is different than we did a year or 2 years ago. It's an evolving process. We're growing. The industry's growing. You're growing. How you do it, you're going to learn from the first time you do it, and you'll do it differently the second time. You don't have to get this perfect. Just do the best you can based on the information that you have. Give yourself some room to make some mistakes and to alter it. Most likely none of these are ever going to be big fatal mistakes. And the other thing I recommend during this entire due diligence period, I know it's sometimes easier said than done, but have fun. Enjoy it. Really acknowledge yourself for stepping out there, especially if this is your first one. Acknowledge yourself for having the courage to step out there, create a deal, go through all the spaces you've got to go through to put this deal into service, and now you're putting it into service. I know sometimes it's hard to kind of sit back and reflect because you're just in the world of doing, but really be inspired by that. You're taking a step very few people take in life, and you're stepping out there and you are doing something that is a fulfillment on a vision that you created. Allow yourself to enjoy that. Good luck as you go through your due diligence process, putting your first or your next self-storage facility into service, and let me know how it's going. Thank you very much. My name's Mark Helm, and I look forward to hearing how your self-storage adventures are unfolding. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you later.